Hello, hello, hello. It's been forever. Waiting for the YouTubes to load, waiting for the YouTube to load. Wow, it's taking a really long time today. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna stop the volume. There we go. All right. Oh, shoot. You know what I forgot to do? Hold on. Never mind. I forgot to do one thing, which is, oh, never mind. Oh, the humanity. Hi, everyone. New pin chat. You can now pin a message on the top of your live chat for viewers to read. Got it. Okay. Sue beat Tony into the room. Sue. Sorry, I'm without speech. I'm so shocked. Sue, do you understand that that's never happened in the history of the YouTube Live? Okay, now I'm worried about Tony. Tony, are you there? I'm so worried. Now I'm so worried about Tony because he's usually the first one in the room. Hi, all. I know it's been a month, but okay, now this is weird. Now I'm literally worried about Tony because not only did Sue beat Tony in the room. There's Chris. Hi, Chris. Chris, Tony's not here yet. Can you believe it? What's happening? This has never happened before. I'm holding a seat for Tony. Okay, you know what? After this is done, I got to go onto Instagram and be like, Tony, are you okay? Because I'm actually a little worried. Actually, I did it once before. Wait, Sue, are you kidding? Are you teasing? That's hilarious. Hi from Louisiana. Hello. Oh, Freaky Geek is in the house. It's not alive without the Freaky Geek. So before we start, I just got to tell you all the craziness of the past 2 days and why I am still wearing the same thing that I wore on Monday. I am in, I know, Chris, me too. I hope everything's, isn't that bizarre that like we're so used, it's been a year. When did Quarantine Live start? It started in March. There's Tony. Oh, Tony, we were literally worried about you. Because, oh my God, it's just ridiculous. Because we've all been together so long. Now, if someone's absent, particularly the person who, first walks in the room, we kind of get worried. Okay, now I can breathe a sigh of relief. And I'll tell you about the craziness this has been the last 48 hours. So I'm on First Pages deadline, which is a really intense period of the book proofing when you get the initial layout and it's like your last chance to make big changes as far as the order or the text or rearranging, because by second pages, it's only about little typos and tweaks, but it's also about like layout changes and changes to illustrations and stuff like that. So I was like hardcore in my work mode on Monday. And I stayed up in the house. I didn't go back to Brooklyn with my husband, as I often do on a Monday, because I wanted a week to myself, to be left alone and just work. And so I'm still typing away at 10:30 at night when poof, blackout, which not for nothing, I had a warning because my husband texted me and said that there was an alert from Central Hudson, high winds. And the winds were like anti-M winds, really intense. So blackout, okay, fine. It's 10, I think it was 10:40, have my little battery operated light, had my iPad all charged up. I thought, okay, you know what, I'll just go to sleep. And I knew the power wouldn't be back in the morning because they don't do overnight work crews. It's too dangerous. It's too dangerous. They can't do work on the down power lines in the middle of the windstorm. They have to wait until everything dies down. But I figured come morning, I would have an alert from Central Hudson with an estimated restoration time. Nothing. So I'm working in the house on battery power and sunlight. It's getting pretty cold. So I go to a local bookstore the amazing, brilliant Inquiring Minds bookstore in Saugerties, New York, where they're so nice and they serve the best hot chocolate and they just let me sit in their comfy chair and work on their Wi-Fi. So then I headed home around 5. And I thought, okay, if I don't get an update by the time the sun goes down, I'm gonna have to make a decision because I have a YouTube live the next day. By the way, no power up here when we're on well water also means no water, no heat, no internet, etc. So 6 o'clock, no crew has been assigned to fix the power. Nothing. So I get in the car, I drive back, walk in the front door of Brooklyn, 8:15, alert, power's back. So back in the car at 7:30 in the morning to drive back up here to be with all of you and to finish working on the book. So, oh, your update changed things on YouTube. Could not find the chat anywhere. Wait, so you were here, you just didn't chat? Oh my goodness. Crazy pants. So anyway, that is why I'm still wearing the same thing that I wore on Monday, because I drove up here, but then I had my monthly marketing check-in, and then I have all of you, and then I'm going to go back to work. And anyway, but you're not here to see me anyway. So let's get right to it. I'm so excited to introduce our next guest. And normally I introduce a guest by full name, but the last name has a little story behind it when I asked how it's pronounced. So I'm just going to say, without further ado, everyone, please welcome Cecilia, fill in the blank. She's going to explain why I'm not pronouncing her name. Hello. Hi. So I asked you the simple question, which apparently wasn't so simple. I said, just checking pronunciation on your name.
Yeah.
Is it? And you were like, oh, funny story.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So my my father's parents emigrated from Italy in the early 20th century and really, I think, wanted their children to be very American. And my father's parents never learned English, but all of the children did. And he always pronounced it Campachero, which he thought was phonetic American English, even though I at the end should be the other way. And also my first name should be spelled Cecilia in Italian, but it's Cecelia, and that's an Ellis Island misspelling of my grandmother's name.
Oh, you didn't tell me that part.
So I have a real kind of American immigrant name, but then in American English, my father would always say Campachero, which is what I normally say in America. And in Italy, it should be Campochiaro, and it means bright field or clear field. And there's a village in between Rome and Naples in the mountains where I think my grandfather's family came from, called Campochiaro.
And have you been?
I have. I've been to that village, and there's another village that I know my grandmother came from called Amorosi, which is about 20 kilometers south of Campochiaro. And my father used to always say, I never met his parents because they had died before I was born, but he always used to say that his mother was short and dark and his father was tall and blonde with blue eyes and from the north. And I used to think when someone says from the north of Italy, I was, thinking Milan or maybe the lakes by the Swiss Alps. But no, I think he meant the village 20 kilometers north of Amorosi. I don't think he meant.
You're like, I'm in the Dolomites. I'm almost in Switzerland. The mountains.
So anyway, it's an interesting story. I don't know his family very well. Most of my family I grew up seeing were my mother's family, and she was from Ohio, from a little town in Ohio. And so when I think of my extended family, the ones I've had the most interaction with are on my mother's side. So not an immigrant family at all. In fact, my mother has a DAR certificate. Family goes back.
Oh my word!
So it's quite a mix.
We know virtually nothing about my father's side of the family. I have the weirdest, Patty Lyons. It is such a Gentile name. It's like all of my we have such American first names, and they were all like inspired. Like my sister Sue was named after the Ivory Soap baby. Was a baby named Sue.
So what's your family story?
Well, so I only know my mother's side of the family, and I really don't know whether Lyons was an Ellis Island made up name or what. My father's side of the family is British, but his great grandfather left, and so we don't know anything about him. So we're from Bessarabia, so which is part Ukrainian, sort of Romanian, sort of Russian. It depends on the year. The border shifted. Bessarabia is actually a very large area. I asked my aunt who was born there whether she knew the exact like shtetl location. But she's funny because we wanted to get some information before she died because she was the last one born there. My grandfather, she came over when she was 11 and went to work in the garment district, where they lied and said she was 13. So like, I remember when we celebrated her 90th birthday, she was like, funny story. I think I'm 88. I think, I never stopped to think about it until now, but I'm pretty sure they lied about my age. So when we tried to ask her questions, it took a really long time to get her to open up, because when we first started asking her questions about, escaping and coming over here, she said, "What do you want to know? It was terrible. We left. You're here now. You're safe. Don't look back. Why? What do you want to know? Why do you want to know?" So she didn't want to talk about it. She wanted to talk about the pogroms and about, Papa's house. He made uniforms for the Cossacks. So Papa's house was safe house, but she didn't want to, she was like, "Why? It was terrible. We left. That's it. Why do you want to know?"
Yeah.
But yeah, it was terrible. They left. And
now it's happening again. It's terrible when people are leaving.
Yeah. So anyway, but that's funny about the Ellis Island because, yeah, I have you ever been to a museum there? Because
I have not.
Because you were talking about looking up records here in Saugerties. The records there are amazing, and
they're online. I've looked them up and I found the boat one. I think my grandfather came twice, but I found I think he like came over and then went back for a few years, then came back again. But at least one of those records is online.
Oh, the museum is amazing. It's really amazing. So I hope you get to visit that someday and come up to Saugerties, where apparently we have a family connection to my.
So I think probably what the listeners didn't or viewers didn't rock onto is before we got on, we talked about how where my grandparents settled was actually in a village just south of Saugerties on the Hudson River. So,
which is where I live.
Yeah, which is really cool.
It's such a nice place here, and it's so beautiful right now. I came up here, we got up here like 10, and the snow hadn't started yet, and then it started shortly after that, and now we have like a couple inches, and it's all the trees are frosted and gorgeous, and it's beautiful.
Sounds beautiful. I mean, here it's, I don't know, 70 degrees and sunny and hasn't rained in 2 months, but it's beautiful.
Oh, well, I hope it rains. Speaking of beautiful, you're going to be joining me in one of the most beautiful places on earth in Maine for Affinity. So I'm so excited because after the first retreat, I did a post-show survey to ask what teachers people want to see in the future. And when it's a lot of answers because it's hundreds of people. So you click that little button in SurveyMonkey that says word cloud, and it just makes the big names. And your name was really big in the cloud. So I was so excited.
Oh, that's really kind. I'm excited.
Have you been to Maine?
I have been to Maine. I went to graduate school in New Jersey, and a couple times when I was living in New Jersey, my friends and I got in the car and took a road trip up to Maine, up the coast, through Cape Cod as well. And that was really fabulous. And then I went again a few years ago and went to Bar Harbor.
I love it.
and I love those. On the East Coast, you get those big clams.
Oh, yeah.
How do you say it? Quahog? How do you pronounce that?
Quahog.
Quahog. Okay, I could live on those. So when I'm in Maine, I want to eat those and lobster and blueberries. So
Okay.
that's all I need to eat.
Well, let me tell you, by the way, for those of you out in the viewing public here, if you're a subscriber to my newsletter and if you joined if you made sure to add yourself to the knitting retreat list, you've already gotten your code to register early. Because the thing that I always get nervous about, I was in my marketing meeting this morning, I said, make sure that people know we will open registration to the public on the 20th if there's space left, because the last 2 years, it's sold out in the early bird registration. There have been no spots left, but when you arrive, you will know there's 2 delicious things that that my photographer, Francesca, one of them she ate every day, which is their lobster roll with the drizzled butter on the fresh baked bread. Oh my God. And then, yes, I do choose several different blueberry desserts that
Awesome.
are amazing. We always have a dessert buffet with a lot of
we get blueberries out here and they're really good. They grow them in California. I think they also grow them in Mexico. So we kind of get them all year round, but they're big. But those ones in Maine are different and they're tiny and they're so sweet and delicious.
Yeah, the big fight is between Michigan and Maine as far as who is like known for blueberries, and it gets quite ugly.
Okay,
they're very, very serious. So now you're going to be teaching sequence knitting for us. So I'm always interested in this. I remember asking Zandy a similar question when it comes to like a very unique knitting technique where one person is like known for that, like that's their thing. How, why, how did this, why, how?
So, okay. So sequence knitting. So let me just kind of lay out what sequence knitting is. Sequence knitting is the creation of knit fabric by the brain dead repetition of a sequence of stitches. Okay. And a bunch of sequence knits already because they've been around forever, like ribbing, like 2x2 ribbing and sequence knitting, and seed stitches sequence knitting. So there's some really familiar fabrics, but the fabrics get more interesting if you make the sequence longer and more complex, and they get more interesting if you change the way you repeat them. So ribbing, for example, is interesting because you can knit a 1-row pattern with, if you cast on a multiple of 4 and knit 2, purl 2 on every row, you're going to get 2x2 ribbing. But you also get 2x2 ribbing if you join in the round, which is not true of all sequences.
Oh, right.
But where it all started is I found Stephanie Pearl McPhee's pattern that she put on her website like in, 2007 or even earlier, called the 1-row hand spun scarf. And in that scarf, every single row was knit 2, knit 1 through the back, purl across the row, and it was worked on a multiple of 4+2. And if you knit that, you get a perfectly reversible fabric that has a knit purl rib with a little bit of a bite to it because you're twisting, because that knit through the back is twisting the stitch every other row. And it's got a 2-stitch garter ladder in between those pairs of ribs. So it's beautiful. I call that a mistake rib. It's a beautiful flat ribbing fabric. But I made that scarf and I just thought, this is just so cool that it's making this interesting fabric, but it's an incredibly simple 1-row pattern. And I just started playing with stitch count and sequences, and it just grew. It just grew. And I was doing that on business trips because I was working full time, and I kept buying books. I worked in Silicon Valley. And
of course you did.
A lot of long plane flights. And after like 2 years of swatching and all these amazing, interesting fabrics, I kept trying to find books that would talk about 1-row patterns, or books that would talk about, ways to create fabric with stitch repetition. And there weren't any. And so I decided I'm going to write a book. And I just decided to write a book.
So you were still working full time, not in knitwear design when you wrote the book?
Until May of 2018.
Holy moly. I didn't know that.
And then I retired from high tech to work on knitting books and knitting.
So the first book, did you self-publish that?
Yes,
How? So this is just,
I still publish both books.
this blows my mind because you asked me that, and I said, oh God, no, because I am so not entrepreneurial. I am so not a self-starter. So people that, like, you were like, oh yeah, I self-published. Like,
Well, okay,
choosing
so
paper, print, like, how did in the world do,
I made a lot of mistakes.
that just seems like so much to know how to do.
Well, so in the beginning, I knew I wanted to write a book, and I knew that the purpose of the book was to explain this idea of sequence knitting. And even things like the title, I originally wanted to call it algorithmic knitting, and I got kind of shot down by my friends because they said that sounds way too mathy. You need to make this sound more
Your
accessible.
your
Uh,
friends were right. Sorry.
yes, no, I know, and that's okay. And then I hired a wonderful graphic designer who's become a dear friend who has done my book designs, meaning like the layout, the font, basic lessons in how to use InDesign, which I'm getting pretty good at now.
I've
She
been
also has
living
done
in
my
that thing.
website design, kind of my brand, but anyway, that's been really helpful to have somebody with a good, clear vision to make sure things look cohesive. And then, I've just hired editors, which I think there's different kinds of editing. There's editorial editing,
Oh yeah,
and then there's kind of copy editing, and then there's tech editing.
correct.
And it's easy to get tech editing or copy editing, but it's hard to get editorial editing. And so that has been a challenge. And I was so in sequence knitting, there was no editorial editing. And so I think it's a little bit of an idiosyncratic book, although I still think it's fresh information today. And I think it's kind of timeless because it's just stitch pattern, which you can apply across generations and across,
A million
colors
different
and age
projects.
mix and all that.
Yeah, it's not like
But
project specific.
yeah, but I think when I'm part of my learning curve is an appreciation for editorial editing and how, as I've had more and more experience and got more editorial input, I realized that's really a gift to get that. And so
Yeah.
Catherine Lowe, who is local to you, gave me a lot of editorial input for Making Marls, which was very lovely.
Oh, Catherine's the best. Yeah, it is. It is totally different. Like my husband is a copy editor, which is different than a proofreader. A copy editor, it's like a square rectangle. So yes, a copy editor will do and can do and does do proofreading. But a proofreader does not make any editorial suggestions as a copy editor does. Now, I have what my editor calls a project editor, which I chose, and she's brilliant, the brilliant Carol Skowski. And it was an interesting learning curve for my publisher because they mostly do pattern books. So they were thinking of the project editor more like a tech editor. But Carol's working with me editorially. So I did not want to wait until the manuscript was due to show it to Carol. So I said to them, I have to be feeding Carol chapters as I go. And they were like, oh yeah, she can informally look at it, but once we give the final, she'll start work. But no, her real work was in the informally looking at it, because there were some giant rearranges she suggested, as in like, this whole section does not belong in this chapter.
Yeah.
That needs to go over here. And this, you're starting with this, but I don't understand where you're starting yet, because that needs to go here. And then, so that kind of work was like, you need a fresh eye that also happens to be a knitter to say, I understand where you're going, but you're starting at C. And then parenthetically, you're like, oh, and B and A. She's like, no, you need A, B, and then C. You need to like, and the way she described it is, she said, your book needs to be like shopping at IKEA. There needs to be that arrow pointed on the floor where the reader is just following that arrow, and I was like, So yeah, people that self-publish, it blows my mind because I just think, wow, the
So
amount of things you need to know.
I
Is a
think it's
lot.
good and bad, right? When you have editorial input, you get driven towards something that's going to be more accessible, but it's also going to be in the flow of other books that have been written in a similar way. And when you're trying to talk about something that is different or new, which is what I've tried to do in both of my books, then it may not fit in that historical context very well. And having the freedom to go do something that's just completely different is also nice. So, it's like anything, there's pros and cons to both
Well,
approaches.
I know what you're saying, but the difference is like there's nothing particular. I mean, my book is all very unique content, but so it's not like it's not a pattern book, but it's more having someone saying, I know what you mean, but the reader's not going to know what you mean yet
Right.
because you don't come back to and honestly, Kay of Modern Daily Knitting had the same conversation with me when I first started writing the column. And she said, you have to be careful in your writing style. And Kay is also Jewish, so she understands where the speech patterns of our culture come from. And honestly, it's a backwards speech pattern. It comes from Yiddish, like that hat on you, I do not like.
Huh.
It's a backwards way of speaking
Huh.
that is in my nature, where it's not set up, point, punch. It's punch, set up. So that backward speech pattern is difficult in writing, where in person in a class, people can see my face, they can follow me, they can. So
I have the same issue. I have some ways I articulate things that is not crisp. And it doesn't flow from A to B in that correct order. And so there's always this sort of unwinding of one's personal quirks about how you say things and trying to make it more readable. And then I like what you said earlier about, kind of changing the whole big order of things too, because that's also really important editorial input. So I think that kind of editorial input, it's like oxygen. I mean, it's just a gift to get that.
Yeah. And the balancing act is making sure that it stays in my own voice. So there was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of, dance at the beginning where, because Carol's a writer and she writes so quickly and with the greatest of ease and with the greatest of elegance.
Yeah, I think lawyers maybe are good at that too. Doesn't Carol have a law degree?
Yes, she does. She's a lawyer.
I thought so.
She's a practicing lawyer. Yeah. But she's written like 1 million books and she's edited 1 million books. So it was so fast for her to just rewrite a section. But I would say to her, instead of rewriting it, flag a section and say, try again. Here's what I don't understand, X, Y, and Z. So try it again. And then sometimes, and this was with Kay as well, there was the balancing act with Kay that she was great at, where other editors in magazines prior to MDK cleaned me up too much. So if I say, and when you do this, it looked real good, I know that's not grammatically correct. I know it's how I write, how I talk, and I'm writing that for effect. So Kay leaves my voice alone, which I really appreciate, so that I can sound messy like I am. I'm a hot mess. And that's, who I am. Anyway, yeah, writing is so interesting. So then you mentioned Marls, which I found interesting because conceptually, they are so connected. I mean, in my brain, they're connected anyway to sequence knitting of like, oh, she's taken a bunch of colors and like saying, what do those do?
Okay, so when you're in math in school, you learn about combinations and permutations. You learn about how things can be combined, and a lot of times it's you have a red ball, a blue ball, and a yellow ball, and what different orders can you throw them to somebody in? And so you learn all that stuff, then you forget it. And 20 years go by and you've forgotten it all. And in sequence knitting, so Stephanie Pearl McPhee's pattern was basically knit 3 purl on a multiple of 4 plus 2. And so one of the things I did is I said, what if it's multiple of 4, 4 plus 1, 4 plus 2, 4 plus 3, and then of course 4 plus 4 is just back to 4 again. So you can take that sequence and 4 one-row patterns based on a pattern multiple of 4, 4 plus 1, 4 plus 2, and 4 plus 3.
Okay.
And I kind of show them in sequence knitting. I kind of show how those progressions all work. And the power of it is you're seeing all the possibilities, right? You're seeing this sequence in a one-row pattern. It has 4 stitches in it. There are 4 possible stitch count options. It's going to make 4 fabrics. So you can see them all and you can decide which one you want to use and you can play with that. And in making marls, it's kind of similar. You have 3 colors. You're going to make 2-strand marls. Well, how many 2-strand marls can you make with the 3 colors? What are all the possibilities? And I think that when we're looking at a stitch dictionary, it's completely disorganized. They may have a knit purl section and a cable section and a mosaic knitting section or whatever, but within each section, let's just pick random pretty ones that fit in this category and throw them in there. There's no kind of logical movement from one to the next. And so I think the 2 books are very connected in the sense that in sequence knitting, it's, how can you create these fabrics with this simple approach? In making marls, it's what are all the color combinations and how can you use them?
Yeah, I love that. So when MDK approached you to do their field guide, like how did you decide how you were going to use the technique and which patterns you were going to do? Did it have like how did you want, because it's a great introduction to people of like, this is how to use it.
Yeah. So my voice, I think I'm getting more readable, but certainly my voice has been very much that of a kind of engineer scientist, which to me is very logical and makes sense. But I think for most knitters, it sounds strange. So when I met with, when I first did sequence knitting, I knew I had to do marketing. I was working full time. I self-published a book. No one knew who it was. So I took the first 50 copies and I just sent them like to everyone I could think of to send them to, like every famous person I'd heard of, every knitting.
I didn't get one.
I just mailed. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Just kidding.
I don't think I knew who you were in 2015, but a few years later I did. So that was my own learning curve and learning and meeting so many more people than I knew then. So anyways, best I could, I sent the books out to people I knew. And I would say 2/3 of them, no one ever said boo, no reply, 0, nothing. And then some people wrote me back thank you very much. And then nothing happened. And then some people, and Kay actually did that. I sent it to Kay. I wrote her an email, said, I'd like to send you a book. What address should I use? She sent me her Central Park West address. I mailed her a book. She wrote me an email. Thank you very much for the book. It looks very, I don't know, complicated or something. And then crickets for a long time. And then I was in New York about a year later. And I wrote to her and I said, are you free? And we had a coffee, which we had a nice visit. And I don't know, something at that point kind of triggered her. And I think also Anne, I don't know if Anne had been playing with it as well. And they started to kind of realize what it was, what I was trying to do. And then they got interested and then they suggested a field guide. And I was all for it. And the idea was, so here's, for people who don't know, I mean, this is sequence knitting and it's a big, heavy book. It's a reference book. And a lot of people, between the sticker shock and the size and weight are just never gonna get it. And so the idea with the field guide was, let's make a booklet that's very accessible and people will get that. They'll kind of get the idea. And if they want to know more, they'll buy the reference book.
Yeah.
So that was the idea behind the first one. And I think it went really well because I think about what Anne and Kay are good at is they're really good at marketing and evangelizing.
I was going to say, I think what Kay and Anne are good at is everything. Someone just found out, a friend of mine asked me where the name came from, and I talked through the whole history. And I said, she said, well, so what was the original business model? I said, it was an epistolary blog. They were like, what? I'm like, yeah, it was a blog between two friends that wrote letters back and forth.
Yeah.
They took
it
an
was-
epistolary blog and turned it into a business that, is amazing.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, I have their first two books, which I think got to know them from that first book, was my first introduction. And a lot of ideas that are really important to me, they were already doing. So they're, so they're, I think they're really good at marketing and evangelism, but they're crackerjack smart too. And like this idea of improvisational work, like with their log cabin blankets, I think of sequence knitting as a framework within which you can improvise. And I think the same with marls, is marls allow incredible improvisation with color work. In fact, I like to say marls are a kind of color work in hand knitting. The only other two people who've really talked about that, I think if you look at June Hyatt's book, Principles of Knitting, and her chapter on color work, she actually starts with strands together as a kind of color work in the beginning of that chapter. And then Monsi Stanley did a lot of work holding strands together. But generally speaking, marl's been sort of hiding in plain sight, not talked about for forever. But in terms of just break one strand, go to the next, break one strand, go to the next, you can do these incredible things with marls. And if you go to Instagram and you look, a lot of people are, right, but no one really kind of dug into it. And when you dig into it, it gets even better because there's so many. Let me show you.
Yeah. Do you have both field guides? Oh, by the way, there's questions that I'm being really bad because I'm so engaged. But are the books found on Amazon? Yes,
Books are on Amazon. So if you
And
want to buy
directly-
a book, the cheapest and get it the fastest, you cannot beat Amazon. But it's much more lovely if you buy it from MDK or Schoolhouse Press or Pearl Soho or some knitting business. But yes,
Oh, you don't sell it direct from your site though.
I do not. I don't retail anything.
But MDK, okay. Excellent. Okay.
And Schoolhouse Press puts all their books on Amazon because that's how they sell most of their books now, and they need to survive.
And Sue says, I love both your books. Oh, and Sue says, I love both your books. Will there be something new? You guys always want new. Well, it's always with the what's next.
Sue, thank you for saying that. So can you guys see, if I tip my screen up, can you guys see, I've got those cupboards behind me, and then can you see there's like 2 stacks of pizza boxes?
Yeah, what's that?
And then I have more pizza boxes on bookshelves here that you can't see. So those are all full swatches, and I've got my photo set up, and I've just cleaned up my studio this morning after coming back from Stitches West, but I'm going to photograph my swatches here. So I'm gearing up for a big photography session for the next thing. And it's going to be about sequence knitting and change ups in sequence knitting. So like putting more than one sequence together. And in fact, okay, so this scarf, let me tell you guys about this scarf. This is a Castell scarf, and it is in Making Marls. It's also a separate pattern on Ravelry. And it is also using this idea of a change up on sequence knitting.
I'm going to make you bigger. Hold on, because this is making me crazy. I want to see you all the way big. Where's the spotlight? I'll pin there. Okay. That's
okay. So this is a parallelogram using sequence knitting, and it's using knit 5, purl 5, and purl 5, knit 5, and it just switches back and forth. And that's an example of doing a change up, because in pure straight sequence knitting, it would just be one sequence. But by doing that change up, you create a really interesting texture pattern. Other thing that's happening here is this scarf, which is 125 inches long because I couldn't stop. I'll move it slowly because I know the camera doesn't keep up very well. But it's like my muse, this piece. It has 15 base colors in it, and 15 colors can be combined 105 different ways. And every stripe is one of the 105 ways. And that's why I couldn't leave any off and stop like a sensible person after 80 inches. And so it's really long, but it's like a lesson in color theory to make it. You just pick 15 colors of lace and you just work them doubled with this sequence knitting pattern, and you get you get this beautiful thing. And so I've written the pattern for 13 colors, and I've also written a little tiny Castile tie for a really small version, but it's
Oh,
just
that makes me so happy that you just said that. Because a lot of people would be looking at that and going, oh, I really want to do that, but I don't want to do it that big.
Yeah, exactly. So 13 colors in a big scarf is just about right. That's 78 stripes instead of 105. So it takes a lot of the length off. And then the Castile tie, I'll show you, I have one here. So often I like to wear my knitting, but I'm hot. And so I'm always trying to figure out how can I show off that I'm a knitter without wearing something huge. So this is just a little tie. And you could just wear it like a little tie.
Oh,
It's
nice.
like a baby scarf, because how often are we sitting indoors and it's warm and but we still want to have something handmade on us. So this
Well,
is just,
with the sweater, the thing that you're wearing right now, it almost lies like the edging of that garment.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
it really is a nice little shape. And it's just this little parallelogram. And this one is made from 8 colors in 4-strand marls. And this uses all the combinations of 8 colors. And I picked all of these colors near orange on the color wheel. So it goes from reds and pinks over to kind of a few yellows in there, but it's really a celebration of orange.
Okay, I'm betting everyone wants to book into Affinity now. All right, I'm going to ask you a question that you can feel free to say no to, because I'm totally putting you on the spot. Any chance of cracking open one of those boxes and giving our audience one early sneak peek at one swatch? You're allowed to say no if that's not kosher. Seriously? That was so pushy of me to ask. Oh, she's going for the... Good God. How many are in each box? That's a lot of boxes. Oh, she's picking one out carefully.
All
right, so everyone has to keep this a
idea
secret
here, right? Those are the sequences in the box. And then, this one's not very full. This one's pretty empty.
Oh, what? How many are in there?
This one has 11, but wait, it gets
Wait a
better.
minute. I thought that was like one swatch in each box, because that's a lot of boxes. How many hundreds of swatches are represented in these boxes? Holy mother of...
So I think I have about 300 swatches to photograph.
Oh my God, that makes my head hurt. What's the little hood thing that you've got on your table? Do you do all your photography yourself?
Yes, I did all my own photography.
What is that little tenty thing?
Oh, this is a flat panel. So let me unplug it. So this is a...
Oh, whoa.
It's a big even light source. So I have 2 of these to create really nice even lighting.
Oh, wow.
I've been working on this for like a year now. This is my new copy stand, my new custom built copy stand.
Wow.
Because I love photography, and now that I'm a book writer, I can use that as these aren't just toys, these are business expenses, right?
Okay, what's your favorite camera then for this?
I'm currently using a Nikon Z7.
Nikon C7. Okay. I'm looking for you know how some of the cameras, I think Canon does this, and Nikon might do, but a bunch of the real legit SLR, yeah, cameras are doing apps that turn it into a virtual camera. So instead of like a junky front camera like this for a zoom, or you can use a legit camera.
Yeah.
I think that would be nice.
Yeah, I've actually done that, but it's just a hassle having a tripod behind my desk. It's a hassle.
Yeah. I think I might go to next time I'm in the city have you ever been to B&H?
Oh yeah, many times.
Yeah. And they're
$80 spent.
I like that they have the desks separated. So this is if you've already made up your mind, you can go there, place your order, everything's fast. And then there's a desk for questions. I think that's such a good way to do it, because you can go up and be like, can I see? And you're not holding up the line of people that are like ready to purchase.
And their website, if anyone's interested in photography, they have, I think, the most extraordinary website where they not only talk about all the things they're selling, where they also have all the details about all of those things, but they also have areas on their website where you can just go learn about like how to do lighting, or, they just have informational things on
Oh,
the
that's
website.
new.
It's at least a few years, but it's really become mature, and it's really become just outstanding. They're really a good company to work with.
Is it still shut down on Saturday, the website? Or is that only for sales?
Only for sales. You can see everything on the website, but you can't put stuff in your shopping cart during the Sabbath.
Okay. Oh, maybe I'll go poke around. Oh, that's a good question. Elsie says my trouble is picking the colors. Any suggestions? That's a good
Well,
question.
okay, so picking the colors, yeah. So I think one thing that is important is, so I think what Kay Fawcett always says, lots of colors always work. So if you have trouble picking the colors, just pick them all and use them all. And it's hard to mess up when you have a lot of colors. If you go to Ravelry and you look at the color explosion throw from the last MDK field guide,
Yeah.
you can see lots of people having interpreted that blanket in different colorways. It uses 11 colors, and there's not a loser in the crowd. They're all good, because when you have 11 colors and then
Right.
those combine to make 55 different marls, it's just a symphony of color. So I think when color choosing becomes really difficult is when you only have 2 or 3 colors, and there's like this huge amount of pressure to pick those few colors right. So one way to make it easier is just pick a lot of them. And then the other thing that happens is once you pick a lot of them and you start doing these marl projects where you start seeing how the colors mix, you start to build your intuition, because the people who are good at color, like Kay Fawcett, Marie Walla, and Alice Starmore, part of why they're good at color is because they've done a lot of it.
Mm.
It's
Yeah, that's true.
skill, right? You build, and if you think about, the problem with knitting is a very slow craft. So if you think about one reason why, like Kay Fawcett has learned a lot, is he's done a lot of projects. I think Arnie and Carlos have this advantage too, like where they just have to make a swatch, and then there's someone else who goes and puts the sweater pattern together and has sweater samples knit.
Right.
So you can do a lot of iterating with a small amount of knitting, and then you see the results and you learn. So you get better and better and better.
So for those of us who put out like a couple of sweater patterns a year, it's because I knit the thing, I grade the thing myself, everything's me.
So you don't get as many learning cycles when you're doing it that way. And for
Yeah.
color, the more learning cycles, the better. And so I talk about it in the book, but really since the book came out, I've been teaching workshops on marling where we make little tiny swatches the size of postage stamps. And
I've seen those. I've seen those on Instagram.
Yeah, and the purpose of those, I'll show you. Like
you did that, I think was it a Vogue class? It was some class where I saw students that photographed what they did in class.
So I use these little tiny swatches.
Oh my God.
And I can figure out color themes with these before I knit the whole piece.
Which, by the way, Kay, I think, was in love with, because there's nothing Kay loves more than doing something quickly. So like the idea of a micro swatch she's like, I'm in.
So, I have a cousin who's an incredibly gifted carpenter. And I remember he was here doing some work some years ago, and watching him work as a talented woodworker, he was always doing something he would call making a jig. So if he wanted to cut a piece to be a certain size, he'd spend like a day figuring out a jig. And then a jig would be some other ugly lump of wood that he would use to push the important wood through the saw.
Oh.
So the cuts were like just right. Or he had jigs for how he would put trim onto cabinets. I mean, he had all these different little tools he would build on the fly so that his woodworking came out beautiful. And I thought, swatching are jigs for knitters. The swatching is the way we take away the risk in our project, and we work out ideas. We figure out the techniques that are going to look better or worse. And the swatch should be just enough work to get the job done. So if it's a swatch for color, a postage stamp is big enough. But if it's a swatch for gauge, maybe it needs to be 8 by 8 or 10 by 10, or big enough that you're settled into a proper gauge as you knit it. So each swatch in knitting has a purpose.
Right.
So I've become a passionate swatcher.
Like, I only use the word gauge if I'm specifically talking about a gauge swatch. Swatching isn't a gauge swatch. A gauge swatch is a subset of swatching.
A swatch is a learning vehicle for a knitter.
Yeah. So everyone that, like in my video sweater classes, they often know that I do like these little practice swatches that we work throughout. But one of the, I remember years ago, I was working with this cotton linen blend, and I was swatching to do a gauge swatch it was a pattern for Knitters Magazine. And I wasn't liking the quality of the fabric, and I kept changing needles. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, I've never worked with this yarn. I don't know what it looks like blocked. So I'm going to be lazy. Instead of making these big swatches and then blocking them, I made a 2-inch little fabric swatch. And I didn't like the quality of the stitches. There were all these gaps and holes between the stitches, but then I blocked it and it fluffed up and bloomed and filled the space. And I was like, okay, now I can stop switching needle sizes, because even though I don't like the way the unblocked fabric looks, I like the way the blocked fabric. Now I'll swatch for gauge.
So it's really interesting. So I talk about this in Making Marls, because when you're marling, you're putting strands together, often across brands. So you don't have any.
I was going to ask you that very question. Sorry, go ahead. I was going to ask
any yarns together. There are. So you may even be putting together combinations that no one's done in Ravelry. So you're really inventing your own fabric, and you have to figure out, well, what needle size should I be using? So I do this. I call this a calibration swatch. And this is the new MDK worsted weight that they just came out with.
Oh, I just got that in the mail when I drove back to Brooklyn. It was waiting for me. I'm so excited.
So so for this one, size 9 is the biggest needle I'm willing to use. I just don't like using a bigger needle than that.
No, 9 feels like broomsticks in my hands.
And so I knew this would center on 7 and 8, and then I typically go 3 sizes down. So I started this on a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I haven't blocked it yet, but I knitted, and I just do 6 rows of garter and 6 rows of stockinette. And you're right, you can't judge it yet, because you really have to wash and block it and then pin it out, let it dry, and then figure out what gauge. And I noticed that the patterns in the new field guide are all done on an 8, but I'm kind of thinking 7 might be my happy place. So we'll find out after I finish the washing and blocking, but it's this idea. So of just, how do you work it out? And the answer is do a swatch.
Now, I was going to, you reminded me of something about the different yarn lines, because when it comes to color, the other thing I was going to say was one of the arts of a yarn company. I mean, you and I know there's only so many mills in the world. So, everyone thinks like, oh, this Joe Schmo's yarn is so unique. It's different than Mary Jane's yarn. No, it's literally the same yarn from the same mill. The art comes in the color range that yarn company decides to put it in. So one thing that is always, used to be such a struggle when I would meet, I would gab with different people from different yarn companies at TNNA, is it's hard to stick to your guns with this is the color story that this yarn is going to tell, when everyone's like, oh, but does it come in a blah, blah, blah color? Oh, I want it in this color. Because like Classical Elite used to be great at that, where they would say, this is the color story of this yarn. So the idea, some yarns, the idea is you should be able to pull anything in this yarn line, and it's going to go beautifully together. Anything.
So yarn companies have a problem, which is they're typically limited by budget, which means how many colors can they develop, and also how many colors can they have in inventory.
Right, and they're going to start baby steps to see if that takes off. So often a new yarn line might launch with like 8 colors.
Yeah, and even 20 is not very many. Which is what the new Atlas, I think, comes in. So Brooklyn Tweed, Jared Flood did something really smart when he launched Loft and Shelter, which is he dyed in the fiber, which is the way the Shetland yarns are made. So the fiber's dyed, and then it runs through the spinnery already dyed, but you can blend different colors together at the fiber level. So I think he had 12 colors of dyed fiber, and from that, he was able to make like 40 colors of Shelter, but they were just combinations of those original 12. So from an inventory perspective, he only had to buy like 12 big quantities of fiber, but he could get more colors of yarn from that, which I thought was really clever. And I think Jamison's and Jamison Smith work that way too.
Yeah. Have you ever worked with Northlight Fibers?
I have. I did their event last fall.
Oh, I meant actually, yes, but I meant they're like worked with.
And I did
their
a
yarns.
pattern for them, which is also using this idea that we were talking about earlier of doing change ups on sequence knitting. It's a really beautiful, very flat, reversible fabric. I did a scarf in their yarn, and it's extraordinary. I mean,
Yeah.
they go from unscoured fiber, which I was amazed because I knew they had a spinnery. And after the event, I was with Olga and they gave us a private tour, which I really appreciated.
Their little micro mill, yeah.
That micro mill, but I had no idea they started from unscoured fiber. I thought they would have started from like top that was already ready to go, but they do the whole thing cradle to grave.
They do the whole thing.
And her yarns are gorgeous, really. I mean, hats off to,
it's incredible.
to her for being willing to do that, because she has creative freedom that you don't have when you go to a big mill where you kind of have to take the off the shelf plan.
Right. Yeah, no, the Laura's colors, and then also the spinning technique and the plying technique, they're plying, it takes more time because of the way they ply, but it's a perfectly balanced yarn.
Well, it's funny because they're lace yarn, which is, I'm always interested in lace because when you're marling, you want very thin yarns so that when you put them together, you end up, I want to be between fingering and DK most of the time, which means you got to start with lace. They call it forever lace because it takes forever to wind. So I thought that was very amusing. But I have to say, those are lovely yarns, and they're, the fiber is not all American, but it sure is not only all made in America, it's all made on a small island off of Rhode Island.
Yeah. Oh my God, the comments are coming in so fast. Wait, I'm going to read for a second. And there's one more thing you wanted to show, isn't there? Come on, the thing I'm jealous of, the thing that I'm not in that you are. There's a certain comic.
Right. Talked about it. Okay, so this is a book that's going to come out, I think, like right around in the next week or two, and it is a knitting comic book. It's called Knit Strips.
I'm so bitter and jealous. Julia Farwell Clay is in that too.
Yes, and it's, I think this is going to get so many new knitters, but just look at how fun this is.
I'm so jealous.
Page after page after page of graphic novel. I mean, it's just an incredible book.
And how did that come to be?
Well, I think it really, Alice Ormsby and Karen Marr are two women who, I mean, they have been just working it for like 3 years. Abrams is the publisher, so they have support from a big publisher, but it's just extraordinary. And I mean, it started out with, do you want to do it, write a pattern, and then it was all about, well, now you have to convert that whole process of a pattern into a comic strip. And I had to storyboard, and then they did preliminary drawings and then final drawings, and I mean, it was really it was a mountain of work, but it's just, I think this book is going to be insanely successful. I think it's going to be
I'm so jealous to not be in a comic and to have all these people I know. So who else is in? I know Julia's in there.
So Verb for Keeping Warm was the yarn company that I worked with so Michelle Phillips, Laura Ergang, Sherry Cook, Rebecca McKenzie, Nora Gahn, Laura McElroy, Natalie Warner, Julie Kornblum, Julia Farwell Clay, Jeanette Sloan, Hikaru Noguchi, Casey Rich, and Anna Campos, and me.
Are they the originators? Are they British or US?
American.
American. Oh, okay.
I don't know where Karen lives, but Alice lives down in LA.
Wow. Well, I'm extremely jealous that you're a cartoon. It's pretty cool. Julia posted the picture of herself.
Yeah, I did too.
Instagram. That was the first place I saw it.
I think the biggest problem in knitting is getting more knitters. And I know that Anne and Kay talk about this with their book Skill Set, and getting new people to take on knitting. And I think about, teenagers and how I think, this is going to help us as a knitting community get more knitters. So
that's why I wanted to add that third package to Affinity, the gauge swatch, because the thing that I mean, so the first year, I wanted to address all the things that keep people from going to retreat or make them uncomfortable when they do. And one of the things was traveling alone. And really, the only issue is that first night where all these people are with their friends and you have to walk around being like, is this seat taken? Is this seat taken? So in the registration, you say whether you're a solo traveler, and then there's certain tables marked solo traveler. Not that you're ostracized to that table, but so that you can just plop down and make new friends. And that worked out really well the first year. But the other thing that I hear all the time from either newer knitters or in the pandemic world, knitters that were knitters many years ago, and we're just coming back to it, or knitters that are like cash knit two, purl two scarf knitters that maybe want to kick up their skill a little bit. And they say, well, I can't go to retreat because I can't take sequence knitting or hap shawl or, Bristol's, I can't take these advanced classes. So I feel like that as a whole in the knitting retreat world, that there's no space for like, I'm a brand new knitter, but I want to go to a knitting retreat in a beautiful area and hang out with knitters all the time and go to the marketplace and do the evening of it. So that's where the Gate Swatch package came in. So instead of either choosing one class from a guest teacher or all three classes from the guest teachers, they're going to be with me, and we're going to do 4 skill builders. So every day they'll have, they'll have 2 on Friday, a session of, knitting technique, and then gauge and pattern reading and cables and lace. But then we're all together in the meals and the evening events and the knit nights and the marketplace. And so I'm hoping that newer knitters will be like, oh my God, finally I can go to retreat. But that's why, like, I don't want that insular,
that's
world.
good. Yeah, I hope it works.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm hoping that and the other thing is knitters always have friends that say, oh, I'd love to go to the retreat with you, but I'm not good enough. So this might be a way to be like, come on with me. By the way, there's a hilarious conversation in the chat, completely not believing you that those are only 300 swatches. Just seeing the number of boxes that we can see and people starting to do math, and the fact that you said there's boxes on either side,
well,
like, there's no way that's only 300.
They may be right. Actually, hang on. I can tell you.
I mean,
I really got to do this. This is out after we adjourn.
I know, which is going to be
studio tidied up this morning for this event. So I hope you all notice it's nice and tidy back there right now.
It's very tidy,
which also helps me think. But
you should see what's over here. Because I got back from, I did see that mess. Woo, yeah, that's me.
I think I've got, hang on.
I had Red Alder, and then I had another event last weekend, right after Red Alder, that I was at a retreat in Virginia. So all my stuff just got popped over there.
I think it's between 250 and 350.
Yeah, I'm betting it's closer to 350.
But one thing I wanted to say that I think I've learned, I think my first 2 books are big reference books, and I like that format because you can explain an idea, but the knitting world does not like big reference books. The knitting world likes smaller books that are lighter, less expensive, and maybe more bite-sized in terms of content. So all of these swatches will not all be in one book. I think I'm going to try and do the next book as maybe like parts 1 through 4, where each one is a small book. And if people want all of it, they can buy all 4. And if they only want one piece of it, they can buy just one of the 4. That's my idea. So
ma'am, if it worked for Barbara Walker.
Well, so it's interesting though, because Barbara Walker, her 4 treasuries, the first treasury was all the stuff she knew at that time. And then people sent her all these new patterns. And then she wanted to talk about garter stitch and shapes. And she also woke up to charting. And then she really wanted to dig into mosaic knitting. So those are actually chronological,
right?
How she accumulated patterns.
Right.
Right. But I want to actually kind of write the big book, but I want to write it as 4 little books all at the same time. So it's all thoughtful about how they relate to each other,
Right.
but that the information is separate enough that each one can stand alone.
Okay, well, here's another really random reference that actually turned into a giant contract dispute. But if I said, how very Three Musketeers of you, would that mean anything to you?
No.
So when they shot the movie, The Three Musketeers, they had written and they had scripted, they shot The Three Musketeers and The Four Musketeers as one movie. The actors thought they were shooting one movie.
Huh.
The producers always knew that they weren't. And so they released The Three Musketeers and they were like, wow, they cut so much. And then out came another movie with not one more penny for the actors. It was a giant contract dispute.
That would be, yeah.
It was a huge scandal. But yes, they shot one giant movie with the full intention always of having 2 movies.
And it wasn't in the contracts for the actors.
No, contracts were so different back then. I mean, there was no like points on the, there was no cut of the box office, points on the front end, the points on the back end. There was none of that. It was just a fee, a salary to shoot a movie. So they're like, will you be sending us a secondary fee? I think it was in the courts for years. But like D'Artagnan, he is only introduced at the end of Three Musketeers. So the actor playing D'Artagnan was like, holy mother of God, almost everything I did was cut out of the movie. He literally thought virtually his entire performance ended up on the cutting room floor. So there you go. So if your swatches had, if I anthropomorphized your swatches, then, like 200 of them will be like, oh my God, I didn't make the cut.
Where's my home?
And you're like, it's okay. You're coming out soon. But yes, you're absolutely right about this, the trim size too, and the weight. I will say, MDK was very excited about the trim size of my book because they're like, that's the same trim size as the field guides. Not the same thickness, but it's the same.
Oh, that'd be nice. That's a nice size. It'll fit in a knitting bag.
Yeah, because it's 208 pages, so it's a book size.
Yeah.
I don't know how many pages the field guides are, but they're
about 40.
Yeah, so this is a 208 page book, so it's a book, but it is that 8 3/4 inch by, which means warehouse space, shelving space. How many fit in a case?
Yeah,
it's all like part of the dealio, So the original trim size they pitched me was larger. It was the trim size that like everything's about trim size. The original trim size they pitched me is the one that fits into like the pre-made holders in the big box stores. And I didn't like that trim size. And then they came back with a much smaller one. I was like, I don't want a pocket guide either. I want like the marriage in between. And I never thought about the field guide, but it's a nice size.
It makes sense that would have converged because depending on the way the printing companies printers work, they start from either rolls of paper or sheets of paper, depending on their layout. And the way they cut that up into pages has different efficiencies. And there are certain standards that drive you to certain sizes where the cost per page is best.
And I know everything's in 8-page increments. I learned that by also negotiating the page count.
But that depends, because like in this book, which was done at a German art house printer, it's 16-page increments.
Oh, I thought
it depends. It depends on the paper they use and how it gets cut up in the scale of the printer.
16. Yeah, because the original page count that they pitched me, I was like, there's no way.
Some of them are 12 and some of them are 20. It really varies from the structure of the printer.
I basically said, take that page count and double it, and then I might be able to fit in the book that I would write, but like there's not, I couldn't fit anything into 104 pages. Forget about it. There's like, I'll have just started introduce myself, and then it's like, oh, acknowledgements. Anyway, let me see if there's any other fun comments, and then oh, hello. I just buy the grand reference books, and then so Sue was saying she likes the big reference books and then Kindle it for travel. That's a good combo.
Yeah, and I've never done these digitally. And the reason why I've never done them digitally is I wrote the books myself, and every spread is written as a spread, meaning like the text up here can refer to the graphic over here.
Right.
And the problem with that is, at least on the digital devices that I have, it's miserable.
I know.
So I feel like I feel like high quality design is one of the things I really strive for. And the way these books are made, they're not good design on a Kindle or a iPad.
Yeah, a friend of mine is self-publishing right now, and so she's done all this research, and it's what'd she say that it was called, like fixed with digital or fixed digital, but there's fixed digital, which maintains what you're talking about. It maintains the page orientation and you scroll through. Yeah. But that won't work for Kindle and Nooks that need it to scale. Well, and so it changes the layout.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Sue says Kindle pages are a mess.
Yeah. I think if it's a text only book, it's kind of a no-brainer to do a Kindle, because text scales and flows really well. But the minute you have illustrations, it gets much more complicated to do it properly digitally. Yeah. And it's just been beyond my ability to figure that out.
Everything's more complicated. Speaking of that, we have talked for over an hour, and I totally have to get back to first pages. I cannot believe, you said, how long do we talk? And I said, until we get bored, which is usually in the between 45 minutes and an hour. For Kate Atherley, we talked for like an hour and a half because we were so deep into nerdball pattern discussion, but it's 3:12.
Okay. I'm getting hungry because it's 12:12 here.
I've kept you so long. Thank you so much. I am insanely excited to have you in Maine. Well, and we open registration for the newsletter subscribers on the 19th. We open registration to the general public if there's anything left on the 20th. And for all of you folks out there in TV land, if anyone knows new knitters or knitters that want to build their skills, that don't want to be in class all day, that want to take, an hour or two of class and then enjoy some knit, tell them about the Gauge Swatch. I really hope, because I've capped it to 25 in that package so that the knitters get to know each other. But I'm nervous that I hope it sells out. That package.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Everyone's saying thank you. Oh, another great live. So in about 2 hours or so, the comments load. So you'll be able to read the chat. It doesn't load right away. So you'll be able to go back and load the chat. And then I will add all of your notes to the show notes. And yeah, so oops, I lost my right page. Back. Okay, here we go. So we have our little goodbye that it used to be very long, but now I'm just going to say, because I think we're past the wash your hands, don't touch your face. I think we're almost even temporarily past get vaccinated. Hopefully we all are. We're almost past mask up. I will say, knit on, take care, mask when appropriate, and welcome back to live knitting events.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.